You're listening to another episode of Faith Deficit, a weekly program that explores individual stories of faith in an increasingly secular world. So my guest today is Dr. Natasha Vita-More. She's an expert on emerging technology and humanity's future. She's the author and co-editor of the Transhumanist Reader, an innovative designer of Primo Posthuman, and an international speaker. She's chair of Humanity Plus and faculty at the University of Advancing Technology. She holds a Doctor of Philosophy, a Master of Science, and a Master of Science in Future Studies. Dr. Vita-More, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much. And I guess I'm going to start, I start a lot of these the same way, just kind of asking what faith background you were raised in.
Oh, yes. I was raised as an Episcopalian.
Okay. And what does that mean to you? How functionally, how did that work for you? Were you going to church regularly?
Yes. In fact, I remember setting out my clothes for Sunday, my hat and my dress and my white gloves as I guess, as an adolescent. I remember always having my white gloves and being very proud of my outfit.
Right.
Well, yeah, it's a girly girl thing. And then I remember very much, going into the church, down the vestibule, into the pew and kneeling at the pew and going in. And one thing that stands out very sharply is the routine of stand up, sit down, kneel, stand up, sit down, kneel, which was very Episcopalian, or is very Episcopalian.
Right.
I love the choir. I love the organ or harpsichord, and the ritual was very exciting to me. Mm-hmm. I recall going through confirmation and preparing for that. And I remember looking forward to Sunday. It was a very social thing where I was living at the time in the Deep South.
Right.
So it was a matter of community. And but I never was a Bible reading person. I've never even read the Bible except for excerpts,
right,
that were part and parcel to either the sermons or through, going to the confirmation classes. I remember leaving the church when I was about 18 years old. I was in the 1960s. And by that time, I'd had enough of men telling me what to do. And here was another one.
Right.
So I left that church and I went to the Universal Unitarian Church, which is down on the Mississippi River. And I really liked that because the minister was an African American. He was extremely wise. He was a PhD. And the scenery was great. What I didn't like was that it lacked the ritual that I had enjoyed so much in the higher church, because the Episcopalians is right under the Catholics. So I become accustomed to that ritual. But I've studied a number of different, religions and spiritualities and belief systems.
Yeah. And during that time, did you have a belief in a higher power? I mean, was that something that you just assumed as part of the ritual and the tradition, or was it something you genuinely felt?
I genuinely believed that there was a higher power that, I remember crying to God and asking why, and, but that's all part of, growing up and, pre-puberty and pubescence and, the struggles and strifes of a teenager. I think that God is, if one is in a religious mode at that time in development, God is a non-judgmental source to go to when the parents are holding you so much.
Right. And so that's fascinating. So then at 18, this is the 60s, so it's a time of social upheaval. And presumably this would have been when you went off to college around that time?
Yeah, right before my senior year in high school, I think it was. And Yeah. Yes, then I went to university. And I didn't go to church. I didn't have a religion while I was at university. Through those years, I was more interested in a level of spirituality and philosophical understanding of why, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and why the hippies the hippies hadn't come yet, why the hippies were doing what they were doing. And Hair was released when I was a freshman in college, I think university, and women were burning their bras. So it was a strong time of feminism, which really met me head on. It wasn't the early feminists like Betty Friedan, who I have met, and I'm not part of that school of feminism. I'm more interested in the early feminists of the suffragettes, who I think were really warriors, and the later feminists that look at the the more postmodernist transhumanist perspective there, outside of modernity. But Steinman, they were a little bit older than me. Gloria Steinman.
Right.
Yeah. So I was a little bit later than that, but I certainly, felt very strong about equal education and career, and not having to always be competing with men.
That's really interesting. So you kind of, because when I think of postmodern feminists, I guess I think of people like Judith Butler.
Yeah.
And maybe I think of Bell
Donna
Hooks.
Haraway and Catherine Hales. Yeah.
So then you were almost a little bit between two movements in a way.
Definitely, because the Donna Haraway and that motor there, that I felt more worldly than that. I felt like I really went through the trenches, and they were being elitist academics that hadn't gone through the trenches, and were more or less philosophizing on what was wrong with men and society. But I lived it, and but I didn't live it to the depths that Gloria Steinem did, and dressing up like a Playboy bunny and being such a famed journalist and scholar in her own right. Yeah, but good catch. That's a very good catch on your part.
Yeah, well, it's just interesting because I think maybe it speaks to what we're going to get to, which is like your interest in transhumanism. And I feel like just kind of looking through your bio and how long you've been in this movement, it feels like you were always maybe a little bit ahead of your time. If that's fair to say. I don't know if you would want to
say, and that's a good thing and not so good. It's when you're out there creating ideas and creating an historical, social, political, and philosophical. It's more like a worldview. I mean, the cast that the net is cast broad and wide with all sorts of hyperbole and blasphemy that you're constantly having to defend. And now, these years later, it's mainstream. And well, it's rewarding if I stick with it and work doubly hard, in social media, keeping my name in the public eye. People don't really care that much about history in today's world. It's, a quick tweet or a quick message, and it's most of my students don't even know who the father of AI is, and they're computer scientists.
Wow!
And it just blows my mind that history in this dynamic, technological, exponential world we're in is not valued. Like, who were the pioneers? What did they do? How did they do it?
Right.
I've always been fascinated by that. But then you can't, hold a grudge on it. You just have to go with the flow.
Yeah. And you, kind of your academic background is such a mix of humanities but engineering, and like you said, you studied computer science and art, and so like it feels like you have this holistic approach to the philosophy. And I'm wondering if maybe through your experience in post-secondary education that's kind of how you started to develop this philosophy, because it's transhumanism feels like a very a philosophy that reaches from a lot of different sources to me.
Yeah, I think that my interest there, and it was something that wasn't planned at all. If I can mind map it out, it's best understood through second order and order cybernetics, where systems thinking really applies as the model, where we're in this system and there's all sorts of variables, and there's some open systems and some closed systems, and there's some exponentiality there, and there is constant shift and combination and disbursement among the systems. So you have to be very fluid and an agile thinker, almost like an athlete of life. But with my fine art background, as a painter and performer and videographer, I love performing on stage and all of that, and dance, that gave me a more poetic sense of things. And during the era when I was studying fine arts for my bachelor's degree, it was during the era of the abstract expressionists. So, to express yourself in abstract ways was really exciting and highly intellectual. But what I learned is that doesn't serve you as you start aging, because there is no job security and there is no knowledge about the real world.
Yeah.
It's the real world we're living in. So I switched and I worked in the field of design, which is more compatible with the theoretical and practice-based work of needs in society, thinking of humanity, and application, let's say applied science, product design, and looking at the world as where are the problems, where are the gaps, and how can I use a creative aspect of my thinking to help resolve those gaps. And I've never been one to stay sequestered into any one domain or field. I like combining fields. And I think that serves me quite well.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's interesting you mentioned design. Like, I don't know if you know or not, but I work. I fundraise for the University of Waterloo engineering faculty.
Oh, great!
In Canada, and just recently we were talking about how the word innovation is kind of out and the word design is in. So everything old is new again.
Yeah.
We're talking a lot about design thinking when we're talking about AI and some of the nanotechnology stuff that we're working on. It's just kind of interesting that it's like you said, to some people that seems really new, but it's not.
And the thing I like about design is that it's architectural, so it has a foundation. And so the structure or the model of the process and strategy in whatever field or thinking application, that foundation must be solid. It has to be logical. It has to be adaptable and flexible and meet the needs of society. And that's the difference between art and design. Art is for art's sake. It can be anything you want it to be. It can be extremely self-centered in wonderful ways. That's how we have our great artists. They totally focus on their own emotions and energy and all of that. The designer is more outward, looking for gaps in across the environment and looking at engineering ways to resolve those gaps or build bridges.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it speaks to maybe what you were saying earlier as well, that when you were younger, you really liked the ritual and the steps of like your religious practice on Sundays. Like there was something about that felt maybe ordered to you. And I wonder if that carried through in terms of your interest in design. And
yes, I think so, because once my interest in, once I became less centered on, a religion and started looking at the way people think and the psychology of the way we think, and traveling the world and living within different cultures, from Navajos to traveling to the Amazon jungle and looking at how people think in all levels of society that the common element was that people like to share. And if you share, you feel good. It just feels good. So it's not done selfishly. It's the sharing is free. Like, it's just random acts of kindness and senseless acts of beauty. It's just a lovely thing. And that's endemic amongst all levels of society. Of course, not in insane areas of society. But it doesn't matter the religion. It doesn't matter the spirituality or the philosophy that that level of empathy and humanity or humaneness is what I'm most interested in.
Yeah, so I wonder if we can talk about, because there's a couple of things I'd love to get into kind of off what you just said, but I wonder if we can just define transhumanism, because this is something that you have been a pioneer in, and it's something that I think a lot of people, including myself for a long time, weren't familiar with as a philosophy. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind taking some time to just talk through what it means to you, and
Sure. In its broadest sense, transhumanism means a transformation, a transcendence of the human through the applications of science and technology that are affording or allowing or bringing about alternatives to a evolution of where we are as a Homo sapiens sapien, or the human species, which has is comprised of the human genes, the mitochondrial genes, which are not human, and many humans contain the genes of Neanderthals. So that being a given, that we are a conglomerate in the first place, and I refer to Dr. Lynn Margulies in that respect, who was a biologist, an evolutionary biologist, in looking at what is life and how did life begin. There is no set absolute on how life began or where it's going. My view is that the core of being human is that it's the curiosity that we hold in problem solving. It's the amelioration of problems, looking at solutions, and the transcendence. And transhumanism approaches all areas there. The curiosity of looking at technology is changing our lives. The element of ameliorating problems, looking for solutions to the world around us. And one of those big areas is disease and our lifespan. And the transcendence is to overcome biological limitations. And that's not to disrespect biology by all means. I love my body, I love being human, and I love life. But what it means is that our lifespan is very short. As soon as we reach puberty, we start dying. Our cells start breaking down. And at my age, at 60, I'll be 68 this month, I think, well, how many years do I have left? Well, probably 20 years. And what am I going to do with those years of good life? Stay as healthy and positive as possible. And that's a given. But transhumanism, in and of itself, developed as a philosophy within the field of philosophy. And it became a cultural movement in the early 1990s. The philosophy was written in 1989 by Dr. Max Moore. It became an international movement in the 1990s through Exeter Institute. It expanded through the World Transhumanist Association, and Humanity Plus is now the international world leading organization for transhumanity. But the term transhuman and transhumanism developed prior. The Alighieri Dante first used the term transhumanar in his writings, and that's Italian. And T.S. Eliot, an American poet, used the term transhumanize in the Pulitzer Prize award-winning play, The Cocktail Party. And Huxley used who was a biologist, a scientist, of high renown use the term transhumanism as an approach to human overcoming certain limitations of biology. So the term has been used out there, but it was not recorded or codified as a philosophy or worldview. It was just a term, maybe an adjective or a noun. The idea of the transhuman is a human in transition, an evolutionary transition, from being exclusively biological, whether it's the human genes, the Neanderthal genes, or the mitochondrial genes, to merging more and more with technology through human augmentations and enhancement. And that includes robotics and prosthetic parts or neuropharmacology and other like cochlear implants or transplants and any other devices that help us stay alive or mitigate disease.
Right.
And so the term transhuman was popularized by F.M. Esfandiari in the 1980s. I wrote the Transhuman Manifesto in 1983. And I had a TV show in Los Angeles called Transhuman Update, and I changed it to Trans-Century Update because I didn't think anyone understood what transhuman was. I thought, oh, brother. So, I remember F.M. Esfandiari was teaching courses in transhuman at the New School of Social Research in New York City and UCLA in Los Angeles, which is a high-end school. Max Moore, when he was working on a fellowship at University of Southern California, USC, wrote the philosophy of transhumanism as a philosophy student working on his doctorate. But what's interesting, it's grown and grown and grown. And the basic tenets of transhumanism as a worldview have not changed. They have stayed the same. But there's certain other elements of it that have grown, and that's good. That's a good thing. What I love about it is that it's not a dogmatic worldview. It's more exponential. It's more part of that second order cybernetics, where you look at variables within a system that need to change, they need to fluctuate and develop. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. And all of us, no matter what our belief system is, are doing our best to help stay alive and keep our loved ones, our family, and our community and whatnot as secure as possible. But we're constly being bombarded. Excuse me, that was hard to say.
It's a tough word, yeah.
By new advances in technology. Every time you turn around, there's a new app or a new concept of a robot, new levels of artificial intelligence developing, the nanotechnology. So this is very important for us to be aware of, and that's why transhumanism is crucial for humanity. No matter what your belief system is, transhumanism is devoted, absolutely dedicated to higher education, to learning, to questioning the tenets that we have out in the world and looking at what needs to be changed, how we can improve upon our current condition, whether it's politics, economics, social structures, all types of interfaces, how to manage better, how to run businesses better, how to run insurances better, how to protect society better, our medical processes. Transhumanism looks at that as a socio-political economic structure that we exist within as a system. And it's not just one, it's not politics or religion or economics or, philosophy or, one thing or another. It's all together. And that our level of education and learning must be more apt to better navigate the future. So transhumanism is the worldview that says, okay, this is presented as a worldview. This is what we need to think about as a human species to protect ourselves in light of the emerging exponential technologies that are affecting our lives. And let's not bury our head in the sand. It's happening. Let's face it and deal with it. And I think design ties in quite nicely there.
Right. Yeah. So you talk about it being a worldview. It seems like it's something that can happen concurrently with faith, because if I'm correct, there are like Buddhist transhumanists, there are Christian transhumanists. Like, so there are people who might have a faith practice who also, you know, kind of believe in this worldview. Like, does that sound right to you?
Absolutely. I've never thought there was any schism between religion or spirituality and transhumanism.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was fostered by individuals who were more fundamental in their religious views that didn't. Okay, here's the issue: that human playing the role of God in determining, messing around with our genes or looking at our lifespan or trying to alter our biology would be part of the God structure rather than human structure. But I don't think otherwise there's an issue other than perhaps transhumanists supports the idea of overcoming diseases and extending and expanding the human lifespan. And part of the religious issue there is that the old should die and make way for the young, that it's a very selfish thing to do to want a longer lifespan and overpopulate our sweet planet. Well, I take a different attitude there. I think it's immoral to just allow people to drop dead so someone else can be born.
Right.
I think you can have both. You can preserve the older person, help mitigate disease and regenerate their physiology so they can grow a bit younger, healthier. Reverse some of the damage of aging and also have, wonderful, delightful children.
Yeah, it is funny because we say that, like, you hear people say that you shouldn't extend your life due to overpopulation, but we do so much in our healthcare system, to extend our life. I mean, if you really wanted to take that argument all the way, then why are we curing any diseases? Why don't we just let, that must be God's will, right? Yeah.
Yes, it was really ridiculous, and it is a ridiculous argument because if you look at it the way you just explained, which is very, very intelligent, thank you for building that lens out for us to investigate this issue, that who put this time limit? Okay, and I think it's part of that modernism view that you're 20, you're supposed to do this, you're 30, you're supposed to do that. By 40, you must have this. By 50, that. 60, get out of our way, go retire, play golf or something. 70, okay, we'll put you in a nursing home. 80, okay, it's time for you to go. There was that mindset that was very linear and chronological.
Yeah.
And we certainly have defied that. I mean, it's not too many people seem to be interested in that. People in their 60s go back to school. I didn't get my PhD till I was 61.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I went back to school a number of times because I was pivoting in my career and I knew I needed to gain more knowledge. And I'm a knowledge seeker, so I would seek out the best programs that I could find in the world and the ones that I could find and afford and go to those programs and be with the top-notch thinkers and learn from them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, I guess, the thing that it kind of comes back to for me, just in reading about the philosophy, I know that one of the challenges that I've read about in transhumanism, and I'd be curious to hear your take on, is how technology can be sort of elitist sometimes. So we may be in the best of all possible worlds, but there are places in the world that functionally are still in previous centuries in terms of their access to technology. So there is something for me that's a bit more compelling because I feel like technology has the ability to be transformative for developing countries, to make huge leaps forward. When I think about how blockchain technology could conceivably be used, or people skipping landlines to have cell phones, or all kinds of other examples where technology can make a huge difference for people, alternative energy sources and stuff like that. So I guess I'm wondering kind of how you would respond to that idea.
I like your use of blockchain for that. That's good. My response is that I'm not going to answer your question by using the same old adage that, oh, it's always been like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even during the days of the Caesars, there were those who had the latest technology and those who lived down the, in the peasants in the wilderness. But it's true. There's always been those who've had better, faster, more eloquent technology than others, even during our hunter-gatherer days, bows and arrows. Some tribes had better arrows than others because they knew how to engineer them, or they had the slate to engineer the arrowheads. So it depends on location. So where people live provided the tools for engineering, survival technologies, and they succeeded. But today it's a different world. And what's amazing is no matter where you are in the world, you can pretty much get on the internet. Even if you're, in some of these developing countries that may be suffering due to natural disasters and, diseases, still have access to certain levels, however primitive, of the most awesome technology the universe has ever known yet that is man-made, and that's the internet.
Right.
They may not have, a Lexus or a Mercedes, or they may not have, top Mac computer or Hewlett-Packard PC or a, big screen TV, but they have access. And that, to me, far outreaches all the devices and stuff that we have. And I think that's pretty awesome in and of itself. Along with that, through the internet, the access to it is the issue. And then the question arises, should access to the internet be a basic human right? So, yeah, it should be open to everyone. But we have political issues and structures that want to keep their populace dumbed down. And we see that where people only have access to what their country tells them they need to know. So that's going to break down more and more. I mean, most countries can pretty much find out stuff. So it's really quite different than it was during the Cold War. But I was in China recently. It was hard to get. I couldn't log on to my university where I teach because the wall just didn't permit it. But I was in South Korea also recently, and it was easy. So it's it depends on where you go and what's happening. But it's going to break down more and more, and I think blockchain is certainly going to help with that. The main thing is to get food and water and supplies to people who need them. Due to nature and not man. Okay, let's take a look at that. So natural disasters cause more horrific situations for humanity than anything else.
Right.
And that includes tsunamis, earthquakes, fires, different things like that. Lack of water, pollution, that's man-made. But let's say clean water in India, in certain areas, there's just not clean water. And certain diseases is because of a lack of sanitary things. And soap and water is very basic, very basic.
Yeah.
Just even the simple thing of soap and water has helped so many people. Vaccinations. So if we could just get vaccinations, clean things, water, food, and, some level of, protection, and be able to ameliorate natural disasters, I think we'd be in a far better place. And I was just thinking about California and the fires, even in one of the wealthiest areas of the world. Those fires did trillions of dollars of damage.
Yeah.
And the mudslides in Venezuela. And think of Puerto Rico. My goodness, they still, most of Puerto Rico still doesn't have electricity. And that's really...
Yeah, or Haiti, But I think there's also kind of there's additional layers of socioeconomic disparity and, histories of colonization. And I mean, there's so much that has happened historically that results in a country. Like if you end up with Haiti, that has gone through so much historically, and then, then it's hit with a natural disaster, right?
Yeah.
It's that much worse. But, there are there's other layers there as well. And I think technology is technology is designed with a certain function in mind. But I think it can be a lot more egalitarian or a lot more democratic if it still works within the larger political system. Like you said, with the internet, anybody can access anything until someone comes along and says, you can't access this. Otherwise, if it weren't for people who weren't, explicitly stopping you from looking at this site or that site, it would be like an open, playground, so that's one of the,
Yeah. And just think, with the advances in many of these technologies that, so there are the downsides like sex robots and, things that could cause lots of problems, some benefits, but problems as well, and nanosystems and whatnot. But you think of, if we're going out into space, and that's a frontier, and mining asteroids and building a habitat on the moon and Mars and near Earth and more distant Earth habitats, and people wanting to live on them because it'd be exciting, and for research and education and whatnot, that countries like North Korea or Venezuela, countries where the dictatorship is pretty strong, they'll become, they'll look silly. It's almost like today when, and it's hit ahead. I'm not trying to, this isn't a lightweight comparison. Okay, today we have the internet. It's great, but we also have bullying, and bullying has become so rampant. It's absolutely nauseating.
Right.
And it just makes me shiver thinking about it. However, the fact that it's brought out in the open, and bless the hearts of those who have suffered tremendously by it, but now it's the shift is going to be, how could you be so stupid that you would bully someone when everyone can see that you're doing it, dodo? I mean, North Korea is just going to look like a silly wimp at some point. If it just, as long as it doesn't do any damage, up until then. And so will governments that try to restrict people to not having access to things when we're living out in space. I mean, it's going to be, it's going to be so ridiculous that people just shake their heads going, oh, for God's sake.
Yeah. I mean, I think that too, but I also, I sometimes feel like there are different worlds within society. There are entirely different worlds thinking about this stuff. Like, there are people who are talking about, like in your case, going to space and, cybernetic enhancements and all kinds of things like that, right? And then there are people who think that, like the Earth is flat,
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me, like, but there's people who are incentivized to be very anti-science and very, and anything that kind of challenges that is considered a conspiracy or whatever. I just find that it's, we have this idea that we're all marching forward towards social progress and like stuff like that. But I don't know if that's the case around the world. I don't know how accurate that is.
I agree with you. I think that, well, let me put it this way. I'm glad that those who are entrepreneurs and innovative engineers designing our future are smart.
Yeah.
And they also are generous and share their wealth. That makes me very happy. And they do want to build projects like the TED conferences or quantified self. They do want to help societies around the world. They'll fund it. The venture capitalists and the angel investors, they're investing in others doing projects that help the world. This is great.
Yeah.
And many of the government grants, you look at them, they are to help society, help education, help learning. They're not grants to help dumb people down. They're grants to help build people up. And so that's a good thing. The fact that there are some cults of people and crazy people that keep 13 children tied to their beds. It's just these horrible things that happen are, it tears at your heart. But you have to put it aside and go, okay, there is diseased minds everywhere. The aim is, where is the core direction going? And the core direction is going towards something that I believe is positive. I think that, I look at where science is going, where genomics is going, and it's not to create, use eugenics in a negative way to create, monsters. It's going to help people overcome Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia and spinal injuries. And, it's the core aim is to help society rather than to hurt it. It's just those who are bioethicists who run on fear, the fearmongers, no matter religious or otherwise, moral mongers, have to find something wrong with it. And, they're running on old historical ideas of keeping people stupid and locked away.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because if you look at, I think about you had a film in 1980, Breaking Away, and you had the Transhumanism Manifesto in 1983, and you've grown and learned from that, but there's also been a certain consistency. And I think about the world now and the types of things we talk about now and the types of things that we have come to take for granted in our lives and accepted for the most part, at least in our society. And then the way, how people thought in the 80s, if you look at that, you can't help but say, well, of course we're using technology, to improve ourselves. Of course that's what we're doing, but it's a slow build, and you sort of mentioned,
it'd be nice if everyone was on board. If we could have Davos Summit or the World Economic Forum or, the Paris Act, any of these groups that people work together and said, okay, let's look at some of these issues. Let's really look at them. Let's unpack them. Yeah, we've got pollution, but isn't it better for private investors to deal with this rather than governments? Because it's just the privatization of things has really helped. Interestingly enough, I was listening to the news where Bezos and a couple other heavy, well-known entrepreneurs who have been extremely successful looking at building a insurance company that is not for profit. So in other words, it's not highly altruistic or benevolent. It's, they're thinking about their own employees to be sure, but it could form an incredible solution to the horrible waste of people's time and energy and trying to keep their costs down as the prices keep on going up. Right. Because someone's making money somewhere. But that would be.
I'm in Canada, so for me, it's a totally different situation. We go to the doctor all the time. We're fine. But yeah, I did read about that. And I think there's an interest in Silicon Valley to look at how not only make technology, but make the world a better place. I think I like to think that's a general interest in the tech sector. And so, yeah, and I guess my sort of, I feel like this could go so many different directions, that's fascinating. But yeah.
You steer it and I'll follow.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm curious about now, we'll skip ahead. So today, you are a prominent transhumanist, but are you also, do you also have a faith background, or is this kind of your main, the main place where your energy goes, if that makes sense?
Yes, I do have a I don't know what does faith mean? Let me just ask you, what do you mean by faith?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out.
Oh, good.
Yeah, on
Good.
this podcast. I mean, I guess what I would say is something, what I'm trying to explore with the show is I'm trying to look at how, not just tips to be motivated, you know what I mean? Like, don't look at your email, or, look every hour on the hour, whatever it is, right? Or remember to go to the gym at least 3 times a week. Like I'm looking at how in an increasingly secular society, we're finding kind of a deeper spiritual anchor. And whatever that looks like, it doesn't have to be traditional religious background or something else, but a deeper anchor, deeper purpose for why we do what we do.
Okay.
Trying to understand that.
I understand. I'll give you my answer. My practice is to realize that peace of mind is the greatest gift that I can give myself. So that means not to be insulted or take things personally, or to criticize others too much, and just to live life in that state of awareness that just sees life and all the elements of it as coexisting. So my perception of reality may not be reality, but through my life and experiences, ups and downs and trials and tribulations, etc., that I perceive it in a way that may not be real to others, but what I can bring about is to share my knowledge with others and to smile. And it sounds so dumb, and it all goes back to John Lennon, and all there is love. It's just on a daily basis, try to do something kind for other people and not make it too intentional. Just try to make it a natural act. Like, instead of thinking, oh, what a jerk, think, well, don't even think that, just move the mind elsewhere, and look for opportunities where I can use my skills or talents to resolve something, and not to have to be, acknowledged for it. Just that in the flow of things, it will help move things forward, or exponential. And so that's my practice. Now, is that a faith? I do believe that humans suffer from our psychological history and our need for fight or flight. That evolutionary process in our brainstem, or wherever it is located in our brain, that reptilian stuff, is there amongst all of us. And it goes back to like the narrative of the 7 deadly sins, greed, jealousy, envy, all those things. Everyone does it. So if everyone does it, then come on, it's in our brains, it's in us. And no matter who they are, there is that element. You may respect someone highly and think they're an incredible, master. And then you see something, go, whoa, I know someone who's a Buddhist monk who is a total ass about politics.
Yeah, right.
A real jerk about politics. If you don't believe in his socialism, you're a horrible person. And we saw this so much with the latest here in the U.S. with politics between Clinton and Trump. I mean, people were so mean to each other. You didn't want to tell anyone who you were voting for because you were afraid someone was going to, attack you. So I didn't put any, people didn't even put bumper stickers on their cars or signs outside their house because they're afraid. Well, neither one of those people are good, wholesome people, but both of those people have qualities that are good. And so it may be more balanced in one way or more balanced in another. But even, my boss, one of my bosses I work, I'll just say, let me put it this way. Even someone I know who I'm supposed to respect can say very mean things to me.
Right.
That are demeaning and insulting, and they're not true. So why does someone do that? Because it gives an upper hand.
Right.
It's not because that person actually believes it. It's because that person is convinced, him or herself, that it's true, so that I deserve not to have what may be rightfully mine career-wise. So we see people using stuff in so many ways that are hurtful in relationships. I mean, you look at people not treating each other well. And so my belief is, okay, let's say faith. Faith is something that you take it on faith that it is, okay, I do have faith here that when someone espouses or emanates a kindness or a smile or a sentiment of generosity, sharing, or love, that it is a very good thing within the system that we live in. Mm-hmm. And that through that, some of the negative, the evil, the dark, or whatever you want to call it, is dispersed.
Hmm. Yeah, and maybe it sounds like you also have a certain faith that through the system and through design and through reason and through science, that we have the ability as humans to get to a place where maybe we can get closer to that kind of, to that level of,
I do.
That level of communication.
Yes, I do. I think that where we are is not where we need to be, and nor is it the final. Yeah. If this is as good as human can get, man. Yeah. So I'm hoping. Yeah, it's like, whoa, gosh, right. You just go, what?
Yeah.
No, it's people profess to be wise and to be evolved and enlightened, and you see them do something that's really jerky, and you're going, huh? So I think that we do have to merge more with certain sciences and technologies to develop abilities to be other than what we are, and to evolve not only in our, cognition or in intelligence, but also in, and more importantly, in our awareness and sense of diversity and multiplicity. And, mm-hmm. Why do people get bothered by other people's, as long as you don't hurt anyone else, do your own thing,
because we're just balls of neurosis, and we have a lot of issues that we don't talk about. But I think that's a great place to leave it. And I think there's a lot of very optimistic sentiment there too. So thank you. I really appreciate your time.
And thank you for asking such compelling questions and having the fortitude and insight to have this series. I'm impressed.
Oh, well,
you're filling a gap.
Well, thank you. I'm hoping we can figure something out. Yeah.
We all are. Come on.
Thank you for listening. You can find our website at faithdeficit.com. Faith Deficit's recorded and produced in Guelph, Ontario at Domo Studios. Music by Jeremy Volz. You can hear more of his music at jeremyvolz.com. If you've been enlightened by this week's episode of Faith Deficit, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and provide an iTunes review. You can also support the program on Patreon, and if you do, thanks so much. I'm Josh Bowman, and this is Faith Deficit.